There are moments in life that arrive dressed as coincidence, but feel like something far more intentional. If you're watching this right now, at this particular hour, in this particular state of mind, it might not be because an algorithm suggested it. It might be because something inside you recognized the title before your eyes even read it. That quiet knowing, that subtle pull, that sense that these words are speaking to a conversation you've been having with yourself in the middle of the night, when no one else is listening. You're not alone in feeling like you've been marked for a different kind of journey. Not better than others, not more special, but different. The kind of person who can no longer pretend, who feels the weight of masks that used to fit comfortably, but now suffocate. Carl Jung, the old Swiss psychiatrist who spent his life mapping the human soul, would say that the chosen one isn't someone hand-picked by fate. It's someone who reaches a point where living with their own inauthenticity becomes more painful than facing the truth. If you're here, it's likely because the deepest part of your being has made a decision. It's finished with looking away. It's finished with explaining away. It's finished with the exhaustion of pretending that everything is fine when something inside you has been screaming for years that it's not. When Jung spoke about God, he wasn't always talking about religion in the conventional sense. He was talking about the image of the divine that lives inside the human psyche. A center point, an inner compass, what he called the self. So when we talk about a warning that feels like it's coming from something higher, something larger than logic, we're not necessarily talking about thunder from the sky. We're talking about echoes that reverberate through your body, through your dreams, through that vague, persistent unease you've been trying to outrun with busyness and distraction. Your unconscious mind has known the truth for a long time. It knew before your rational mind was ready to admit it. It knew in the form of sleepless nights. It knew in the form of anxiety that had no obvious source. It knew in the form of tears that came at strange moments, for reasons you couldn't explain. And often that warning revolves around a specific person. A man. He might be polite. He might be intelligent. He might be the kind of person who can hold eye contact a little too long and make you feel like you're the only person in the world. He might have been your safe place once. Your person. The one who understood you when no one else did. But somewhere beneath the surface, there's a knot. A tightness, a sense that something isn't right, that you've swallowed down so many times you've almost forgotten it's there. This isn't a video about judging him. This is a video about seeing the pattern that's been steering your heart, sometimes gently, sometimes violently, for longer than you care to admit. In the time we spend together, we're going to go deep into 3 questions. Why does this man pull you so powerfully? What is the deeper intelligence behind the warnings you've been receiving? And perhaps most importantly, what happens to your soul if you keep ignoring what you already know? Because before we dissect who he is, there's a more uncomfortable question waiting. Who are you in this story? The one who stays wounded, or the one who was chosen to finally walk toward freedom? Stay with me until the end, because the way you answer these questions might change how you look at every relationship you've ever had, and every relationship you'll ever have. Part 1. The man in 3 layers. Let's start with the obvious. The person your mind went to the moment I mentioned him. He's not a symbol. He's not an archetype from an old mythology book. He's flesh and blood. He has a name. He has a history. He has wounds of his own, even if he'd never admit to them. It might be an ex-partner who still occupies more mental space than you'd like to admit. It might be your current partner, the one sleeping next to you, the one whose presence feels both familiar and somehow off. It might be a friend, a teacher, a mentor, a colleague, someone who never officially became a relationship but left a mark anyway. Here's what they all share. His presence in your life isn't neutral. It never has been. He doesn't pass through like weather. He changes the landscape. Layer 1. The persona. On the surface, he might seem perfectly fine, even exceptional. He speaks with intelligence. He listens in a way that feels rare. He asks questions that make you feel seen. He might have that quality where rooms shift when he enters, or the opposite. He might be quiet, reserved, the kind of person whose power comes from stillness rather than motion. You look at him and think, finally someone who gets it. Finally someone who sees past the surface. Finally someone who isn't like the others. And that's exactly where the entanglement begins. Because at this layer, you're only seeing what he shows. Jung called this the persona, the mask everyone wears to navigate society. His mask might be convincing. Good man, responsible provider, spiritual seeker, wounded soul trying to heal. But masks, by definition, are not the whole truth. Beneath every persona, there's shadow. Impulses he doesn't acknowledge. Fears he's never faced. Hunger for control dressed up as concern. Helplessness disguised as depth. Shame hidden behind vulnerability. That vague unease you feel? That brush against something uncomfortable? That's you sensing the shadow beneath the mask. Your nervous system picking up what your conscious mind is still trying to rationalize away. Layer 2. The archetype. This is where it gets deeper. At the second layer, he's no longer just a specific person with a specific name. He's become the embodiment of something ancient. Something that lives in the collective unconscious of every human being who has ever lived. Jung called these primordial images, archetypes. Ancient patterns of energy that shape human experience across cultures and centuries. This man might be carrying the energy of the trickster, the one who dances along the line between truth and deception, who rarely lies outright, but speaks in half-truths so skillfully woven you can never quite pin down what's wrong, who rarely attacks directly, but creates an atmosphere where you constantly question your own perception. Or he might carry the energy of the shadow masculine, a form of masculinity that hasn't matured, that needs control, because underneath, it's terrified of its own weakness. That mistakes manipulation for depth and emotional unavailability for strength. If you study the old myths, you see this figure everywhere. Loki in the Norse stories, Hermes in the Greek pantheon. Figures who are both messengers and manipulators, both helpers and destroyers, who stand at the threshold between worlds, between truth and illusion, between the sacred and the profane. The man in your life is like he can talk about healing while cutting you open. He can speak about spirituality while doing things that violate the most basic spiritual principles. He can discuss self-development while remaining fundamentally unchanged. Layer 3. The inner figure. And then there's the third layer, the most subtle, the most uncomfortable. At this level, he's not just out there. He's in here. Inside you. Jung called this the animus when speaking about women. The inner masculine image. The internal voice that every woman carries with her. The invisible partner that shapes how she relates to actual men. If you're a woman, listen carefully. That voice in your head that says you're not enough. That without him you're nothing. That if you leave, no one else will ever truly want you. That voice isn't entirely your own. It's a composite, shaped by every significant masculine figure who ever spoke into your life. Your father, your brothers, your first loves, your wounds. The man out there is just a screen, a projection surface. He makes visible what was already living inside you. If you're a man watching this figure might not be a lover at all. It might be a boss, an older brother, a mentor you both admire and resent. Someone who does things you'd never dare do, who says things you're afraid to say, who crosses lines you only cross in your imagination. He represents something in you that hasn't found its own expression. This is where Jung asks us to face something difficult. The man who haunts you, who pulls you, who unsettles you, is never random. He's not an accident. He's a mirror, summoned by your unconscious out of the vastness of the outer world to show you something about yourself. Every gesture that hooks you, every sentence that lands, every moment of pain, each one is touching something old, something that was there long before he arrived. The image of your father, perhaps, or the absence of him. The first man who ever disappointed you, the messages you absorbed about your worth before you had words for them. When we talk about a warning that feels divine, it's not just about him. It's about the self pulling you toward that mirror, insisting that you look, really look, because only when you see clearly who he is in this three-layered way can you begin to see who you've been in this story. The victim, the rescuer, or the one who finally takes responsibility for their own soul. Part 2. The language of warning. So how has the warning actually come to you? Because it hasn't started today. It's been coming for a long time. You just haven't wanted to translate it. The unconscious doesn't speak in bullet points and logical arguments. It speaks in a different language entirely. Sensations, images, events that seem coincidental but carry weight. The body's language. The first warnings always arrive in the body. A tight chest, a knot in the stomach, that suffocating feeling before you see him. You're sitting across from him at a cafe. He's smiling, he's sharing. He's being vulnerable about his past, his wounds, the people who wronged him. And yet, there it is. That cold current running through you, that tiny whisper. Something isn't right. And what do? You tell yourself you're being too sensitive. You're overthinking. You're projecting your own issues. And just like that, with your own hand, you switch off the first warning. Here's what Jung would say. Your body doesn't invent things. Your nervous system is picking up micro-signals that your conscious mind is too distracted to process. The eyes that don't match the smile. The tone that doesn't align with the words. The stories that shift slightly each time they're told. The body is where the unconscious lives. When you lie in bed after seeing him, chest heavy, mind buzzing, that's not nothing. That's language. That's the self knocking. The dream's language. When you ignore the body long enough, the unconscious upgrades to dreams. You start having strange dreams. Maybe he's not even in them, but the feeling is the same. You're lost in a building with endless rooms. You're in a car he's driving, and it's going too fast, and you're too afraid to ask him to slow down. You're trying to call someone, but the numbers won't dial correctly. If you mention these dreams to someone, they'll say it's just stress, just random brain activity. But in Jung's framework, dreams are letters from the unconscious. Encrypted, yes, but meaningful. The building with endless rooms? That's an image of your own psyche. The endless corridors? That's what it feels like to be trapped inside a structure with no exit. The car he's driving? You've handed him the wheel of your life. The unconscious doesn't say, "This man is dangerous, leave him." It paints a picture. It creates an experience. It asks you to feel what it feels like to be in that car, to be in that building. And then to ask yourself, where is this going? Synchronicities language. Then there's synchronicity, the strangest language of all. You open social media, and a video appears about exactly the behavior you've been trying to explain away. You pick up a book and it falls open to a page that says, "He doesn't love you, he loves what you give him." You're walking and you overhear a conversation between strangers talking about people who stay too long in relationships that are killing them. And you laugh it off. What a coincidence. Then you keep scrolling. Keep walking. Keep pretending the universe hasn't spoken. Jung coined the term synchronicity for these moments. Not because the universe is playing games, but because your psyche is on a certain frequency, pulling in fragments that carry the same vibration. When you're in a pattern that needs to break, the world fills up with messages about breaking it. The signals get denser, clearer, closer. And still, you find ways to ignore them. The patterns language, the most sophisticated language of the unconscious, reserved for those who are truly being called to wake up, is the repetition of patterns. You start to notice that this man isn't the first. Before him, there was another who left you guessing. Before that, another who made you feel like you had to earn love. You change the names, change the faces, change the circumstances, but the inner feeling is identical. That familiar ache, that familiar confusion, that familiar sense that if you just try a little harder, it will finally work. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Each man is a variation of the same theme, sent to ask you one question. This time, will you choose differently? Here's what you need to understand. The more you ignore the warning, the more it escalates. It starts as unease, becomes coincidence, becomes dreams, becomes loss of life force, poor sleep, inability to concentrate, your mind looping around one person like a record stuck in a groove. That's the unconscious taking up more and more bandwidth. It won't stop until you stop, until you pause, until you finally listen. So look back. Honestly, what has your body been telling you? What have your dreams been showing you that you forget when you wake? Which coincidences have you dismissed as overthinking? How many times have you stood in this exact place, looking at this exact pattern, knowing it hurts, and whispering to yourself, "This time will be different"? If you want, leave a line below. Not for me, for yourself. Sometimes naming it is the first step the soul takes toward healing. Part 3. The pull. But here's the question that cuts deeper. If the unconscious has been warning you, why are you still so drawn to him? Why does knowing something is wrong coexist with being unable to let go? In Jung's language, the answer doesn't start with him. It starts with the wounds you carried long before he arrived. The father wound. For many, the story begins with another man. The father. Not necessarily a terrible father. Sometimes just an absent one. Physically or emotionally. Always working. Always tired. Always somewhere else. You learned early that love had to be earned. That if you were good enough, quiet enough, understanding enough, maybe he'd see you. Maybe he'd stay present. And your unconscious, faithful to that early learning, goes looking for men who recreate that dynamic. Men who make you strive, who make you earn, who keep you one step below. When you meet this man, you don't think about your father, but your body recognizes something. Familiar territory, an unpredictable rhythm, hot and cold, tender then gone. It hurts. And yet, strangely, it also feels like home. That's the pull of the wound. It drags you towards situations that allow you to replay the old story, hoping for a different ending. If this time he stays, if this time he chooses me, maybe the child inside will finally believe she's worthy. Take a moment. If you're willing, ask yourself, who does this man remind you of from your past? What's the first emotion that comes when you think of that person? You don't need to write the whole story, just the name, just the feeling. Sometimes that's enough. The complex. In Jung's framework, wounds don't just sit there. They organize into complexes, clusters of feeling, memory, and belief, bound together in the unconscious, shaping your reactions without your permission. A complex activates when someone or something hits the right button. This man is the finger pressing that button. That's why you don't react to him like an ordinary person. You react to him like an entire unhealed past. And here's the irony. These very complexes are what create the chemistry. When he talks about exes who never understood him, the part of you that was never understood lights up. When he shows vulnerability, the part of you that wants to heal someone activates. You don't just become his partner, you become his healer, his savior. What could feel more meaningful than that? But Jung would warn you, whenever you find yourself as the only one who really understands someone, be careful. Chances are, a complex is running the show. Projection. Another reason you're drawn is idealization. In Jung's terms, projection. You look at him and see depth, strength, authenticity, decisiveness, qualities you perhaps once longed to live in yourself but suppressed. To be safe, to be liked, to fit in. He becomes the screen onto which you project the vibrant parts of yourself you abandoned. You don't just love him, you love the version of you that's only allowed to exist through him. The fear of emptiness. Then there's something more basic. The fear of emptiness. What's familiar, even when it hurts, often feels safer than what's new. If you've spent your life waiting, guessing, reading moods to survive, then a man who is consistently kind can actually feel boring. You're not used to peace. You're addicted to the highs and lows, the waiting, the intermittent reward. It's like a sugar addiction. You know it's harmful, but without it, life feels flat. This man offers exactly the emotional sugar your nervous system is wired to crave. So when you ask why you're drawn, don't settle for shallow answers. Because he's a good man. Because it's fate. Jung would push you deeper. Who does he resemble? Which complex does he activate? Which parts of yourself have you handed over to him? When you answer those questions honestly, the pull starts to lose its magic. It's no longer his power over you. It's a map pointing to the places in your soul that need your attention, that need healing, that need to be taken back. And from that moment, the story shifts. From I can't resist him to I no longer want to abandon myself. Part 4. The nature of the warning. People call it a warning from God, but through Jung's lens, God here isn't only an external being. It's the deepest voice of your own soul, pulling you back toward your center. Jung was careful when speaking about God. He didn't argue about existence in the way philosophers do. He looked at the image of God living in the human psyche, the innate symbol of wholeness, the invisible center that coordinates inner life. He called it the self. When religion says God is warning you, Jung would say the self is speaking, because your ego has drifted too far from the axis of your soul. Loss of balance. Here's the first point. The warning doesn't begin with him. It begins with an inner loss of balance. Think about it. True warnings don't only appear when you meet a dangerous person. They appear whenever you live too long against your own truth. In a job that drains you. In a persona you maintain just to be accepted. In a life where you've shrunk yourself to fit into spaces that were never designed for you. At those times, the deepest layer of your psyche starts to rebel. Sleep becomes difficult. Joy feels fake. Laughter doesn't reach your eyes. So why this time does the warning come through him? Because the self doesn't speak in abstract concepts. It uses people as mirrors. This man, with all his magnetism and shadow, is the mirror the self is using to show you something. You've been handing your worth over to the outside, loving like a gambler. Either he chooses you and you're valuable, or he turns away and you collapse. The warning is trying to shift your axis, away from who is he, toward who are you, and how far have you drifted from your own truth. Purpose, not punishment. Religion often uses the language of judgment, right and wrong, sin and punishment. Jung takes a different path. He asks, what purpose does this serve in your journey toward becoming yourself? When a relationship shatters you, but in the process strips your deepest wounds bare, forces you into honesty, forces you to face your childhood, forces you to question everything. Then in the eyes of the self, that's not just disaster. It's a necessary initiation. The warning is an invitation. You can't keep living at this shallow level anymore. Protecting your path. Many people, when they hear God is warning you, picture an angry deity, ready to judge the other person. But in Jung's framework, the focus isn't on punishing him. It's on protecting your individuation, your journey toward becoming whole, no longer possessed by wounds and projections. What does that mean practically? It means if this man stays in your life too long, you'll remain stuck in old roles. You'll never have space to discover other parts of yourself, your own desires, your own voice, your own path. So God is warning you is another way of saying, this lesson is complete. It's time to move to a different level of consciousness. Honesty, not fear. Here's another crucial point. The self's warning never comes to make you smaller, only to make you more honest. When you hear God is warning you with ears full of guilt, you'll only feel afraid. When you hear it with the ears of someone growing, you'll feel something different. This is a chance to stop betraying myself. Jung didn't romanticize suffering, but he didn't see it as meaningless either. He saw in crises a hidden purpose, to break an outdated image of the self, to make room for something wider, truer. A warning is the moment when the old self-image no longer works, and deep down a new image is insisting on being born. I am someone who has the right to be safe. I have a life that exists apart from his story. If you see the warning only as a red flag hanging over his head, you'll stop at fear and anger. But if you look through Jung's lens, you'll see it differently. A sentence passed on a pattern, a liberation granted to you. Part 5. The price of ignoring. So what happens when you ignore the warning? Jung wouldn't call it sin. He'd call it a psychological price, one that you will pay, sooner or later. Loss of self. The first and most painful price isn't losing him, it's slowly losing yourself. When you first entered this, you had a fairly clear sense of who you were, your boundaries, your values, your identity. But to stay beside someone who constantly pushes against your limits, you have to adjust. The first time you overlook a disrespectful comment, the next time you tolerate a disappearance without explanation. Then you start explaining his behavior away to protect the image. Each time you bend your inner spine a little more. Eventually, you no longer remember who you were before him. The toxic triangle. The second price is getting trapped in a distorted dynamic. Victim, rescuer, perpetrator. You cycle through all three. Sometimes you're the victim, hurt by his silence, dismissed by his indifference, punished by his absence. Sometimes you're the rescuer. Only I really understand him. If I leave, he'll fall apart. I have to save him from himself. Sometimes, from too much pain, you become the perpetrator, accusing, controlling, checking, hurting back. And then you carry the guilt of that too. This triangle has no exit, only rotation. Self-betrayal. The third and deepest price is self-betrayal. Every time your intuition says no and your mouth says okay, you send yourself a message. Your feelings can't be trusted. Every time you excuse his hurtful behavior, you whisper to yourself, this is what you deserve. Over time, you don't need anyone else to gaslight you. You do it yourself. You become the one who dismisses your own truth. And in doing so, you step further and further from your own soul. The body's protest. When you repeatedly ignore the warning, it escalates to the body. Anxiety, panic attacks, disordered eating, insomnia, physical pain with no medical cause. From a Jungian perspective, these are the soul's way of protesting when it's been pushed to the margins. The body becomes the voice the conscious mind refused to hear. The future price. The most dangerous part? At some point, you don't just lose connection with yourself. You lose the ability to trust anyone. After long cycles of ignoring warnings, you may leave exhausted and conclude, love is a lie. All men are the same. All relationships are traps. The price isn't just in your past. It seeps into your future. You build walls. But walls don't discriminate. They keep out what's dangerous, yes, but they also keep out what might heal you. You get away from him, but you no longer trust your own capacity to choose. None of this is to scare you. It's to make one thing clear. Staying never means keeping everything. You might avoid the acute pain of a breakup, but you take on the long, dull pain of living against your own truth. One is the short pain of surgery. The other is the slow infection that quietly erodes your health. Choosing to avoid the operation today is agreeing to carry a time bomb inside you. Jung wrote that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Ignoring the warning is trying to imagine light while the darkness grows thicker. Looking at the psychological price isn't about terror. It's about asking yourself one honest question. What am I really willing to pay? And sometimes that question alone is enough to make you stop. Look back, and for the first time in a long time, choose to stand on your own side. If you've stayed with this until now, it's already a sign. Your soul is more serious about itself than you think. Stay with me until the end, because what comes next isn't about the price. It's about how to walk out without abandoning yourself one more time. And if somewhere inside you feel that these words are giving language to something you've never dared to name, then hit like and subscribe. Not for me, for you. As a small way of saying I'm ready to look straight into my own darkness. And I don't want to walk this path alone. Part 6. The Path of Maturity. Jung never stopped at analyzing pain. For him, the more important question was always, from here, what do you do? A warning is not a sentence. It's an invitation to step into a new phase of psychological maturation. And maturity, in Jung's language, begins with one simple move, the hardest one of all. Step 1. Stop and look inward. The first step isn't dramatic action. It's stopping, long enough to see clearly what's actually happening inside you, instead of sending one more message, making one more call, offering one more explanation. Do the opposite. Sit alone. Pen and paper. Write not to complain. Write to observe. Start with concrete questions. When did I first know something was wrong? What does my body feel when I think about him? When was the last time I betrayed my own intuition? Don't edit. Don't polish. Let the raw answers spill out. That's how, in true Jungian spirit, you slowly bring the unconscious into consciousness. Step 2. Take back projections. This is one of the most powerful Jungian practices. Instead of obsessing over who he is, ask, what of me have I put onto him? Try this exercise. Draw 2 columns. On one side, write what you admire in him. On the other, what you resent. Then for each line, ask, does this exist in me? Either as something I've never let myself live, or something I'm trying hard to deny. The depth you admire might be your own unlived depth. The control you resent might be your own disowned power. The freedom you envy might be your own imprisoned self. Step 3. Learn the language. Begin learning the language of the unconscious again, but this time consciously. Each morning, write down any dream fragments, even one image, one feeling. Then ask, what is this commenting on in my current life? Try inner dialogue. Write a conversation between you today and the child you once were, or between you and that inner voice that keeps saying you're not enough. Let the words pour out without censorship. You might be surprised by answers that seem to come from somewhere deeper than your thinking mind. Step 4. Real-world boundaries. Inner work must translate into action. Boundaries don't always mean blocking him immediately, though in some cases that's necessary. Sometimes boundaries begin smaller, not replying when you're in a state of panic, not answering late-night calls that soothe his loneliness while draining you, not agreeing to meet when you're still raw. Prepare clear sentences ahead of time. I need space right now. I can't carry this with you. This isn't working for me anymore. When you say it, don't over-explain. Don't defend. Let the guilt rise. Let it pass. That's the new muscle of your soul being trained. Step 5. Ritual closure. Human beings need ritual. It signals to the mind that something has shifted. Write a letter to him you'll never send. Pour out everything. What you felt, what you lost, what you learned. Then tear it up. Burn it. Watch it turn to ash. That's you handing the story back to the past. Gather things tied to the relationship. Messages, photos, gifts. Put them in a box. Put the box somewhere you don't see daily. You don't have to erase everything. You just have to stop feeding it every day. Step 6. Rebuild around the self. This is the long-term work. Rebuilding a life oriented around you, not around others. Start small. Daily practices, walking, journaling, reading, silence. Not to become better for someone else, just to send this message. My life has its own rhythm, regardless of who stays or leaves. Reconnect with people who see your value. Old friends, family, safe community. Let your nervous system remember what it feels like to be in spaces where you don't have to brace yourself. If possible, find a guide, a therapist who understands depth work, someone who can help you navigate the layers you can't reach alone. Jung said the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. Answering the warning isn't about getting away from a bad man. It's about accepting the long journey of becoming more honest, more responsible, more gentle with yourself. Every time you choose to listen to your feelings instead of crushing them to please someone. Every time you say no to what hurts you. Every time you pull back a projection. You grow a little more mature in the eyes of your own soul. And from there, the choices you make next won't be dictated by your wounds, but by a clearer, wider, steadier understanding of who you were born to become. Conclusion. If you've journeyed with these words all the way to here, then somewhere in you, the story has shifted from a story about him to a story about returning to yourself. A warning, seen through Jung's eyes, has never been just about avoiding a bad relationship. It's the moment you step out of a thick fog and realize you've been living in a story far smaller than your soul. You don't need to understand everything tonight. You don't need a perfect plan. It's enough if tomorrow you stop rushing to deny what your body feels. Stop rushing to justify what hurts. Stop calling your deepest inner voice weakness. It's enough if you begin to see the people passing through your life not just as fate or karma, but as mirrors, showing you where you are on the journey of becoming yourself. And there's a point beyond all this chaos. A quiet place where you no longer ask, "How do I keep him?" but instead whisper a different question. Calmer. Far stronger. How do I stop losing myself? Even one more time. From that question, a new life begins.